Thank you very much for coming to Hungary. I know that you are booked 1 year in advance. It's
Something
right?
like that, yeah.
Oh my God, this is really, it must be really exhausting. And you are really like a rock star. I mean, look at this crowd. all these people came to you, but not only this, but only in the past few weeks, you met Mark Zuckerberg, you met Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, or Wired editor-in-chief. Why have you decided to accept the invitation to come to Hungary after meeting all these global players?
Well, I try to, because I'm a global historian and thinker, I try to visit as many different countries as possible to get a really comprehensive and broad view of what's happening in the world and where are we heading. I don't want to find myself trapped just visiting places like Silicon Valley and New York, you know, the global, and in China, just the global centers of power, because then you get a very distorted view. And I got this invitation from Budapest, from the Central European University, to give a talk in the Reasons for Hope series, which is a very prestigious series. I know that Charles Taylor, the Canadian philosopher who is one of my intellectual heroes that shaped my view of the world to a large extent, he will be giving another talk at the end of this month. So I was very happy to accept this honor and also to use it to see a bit of Hungary and talk with people.
And what did you learn, or what a historian like you or thinker like you can learn from Hungary and what's going on here in Hungary?
Well, I still need to process that. I'm just in the middle of the visit. But, you know, wherever I go around the world, now people are engaged with the same issues, but not in the same way, not from the same perspective. The same issues, on the one hand, the global challenges of climate change and the rise of artificial intelligence and bioengineering, they concern people all over the world, and they should. And also the political changes, like the crisis of the European Union and the rise of populism. People all over the world, whether in China or in Brazil or in the US or in Hungary, they are concerned about this. But they, of course, have different views. I mean, you go to California or you go to Eastern China, and everybody is so excited about the amazing potential of the new technologies. You go to other countries and there is a palpable fear that we are being left behind, and what will be our fate in a world when you have these two giant superpowers controlling everything through the new technology. So this is part of what I get from visiting different places like Hungary. In Hungary, I saw, yes, there is a lot, at least for the questions of the audience yesterday and of journalists that I met also today, a lot of concern about the crisis of the European Union and about the fear of being left behind in this race to new technologies. And
do you think it's a legit fear from Hungary or the Hungarian people?
Oh, it's a very legitimate fear. I think that most of the world is lagging far behind the US in China in terms of the new technologies like AI. I think that in most of the world, not enough is being done about the immediate crisis of climate change that threatens the very survival of humankind. Not enough is being done about the deteriorating global relations, which again raises the specter of global war and nuclear war. And I think that Hungarians should be concerned about all these issues far more than they are concerned about the immediate issues that capture the attention of most people, like immigration or like Brexit. I mean, I think that, you know, Brexit and even immigration, they won't destroy humanity. Whatever Britain does, humanity will survive. But if we don't deal with climate change and with AI in the right way, humanity won't survive.
You keep writing in your books and also telling that actually what matters the most is who can tell the most compelling story. The stories which brings humanity together. This is what brought humanity together.
Yes.
And it seems that some political powers and some politicians seem to give a more compelling story when they speak about either immigration or Brexit,
yes,
which people tend to go for. What can a thinker like you, or what can we do to overcome or to give a more compelling story?
Yeah, because it excites the immediate kind of primordial emotions of fear and hatred and fear about foreigners. So it's very easy to, I mean, if you want to grab people's attention, it's it's like you are producing a TV series and you want to grab the audience attention, then to have a lot of violence and a lot of sex, it's like the winning formula. So even if the show has nothing to do with it, just have a couple of naked people doing sexy things, it will grab people's attention. That's the easy thing in TV. The easy thing in politics is to raise fears about foreigners. Oh, the evil foreigners are coming to get us, are coming to displace us, are coming to kill us. So, there are cases in history when this is really happening. It's not always complete fiction, but there are many cases when these primordial fears that we carry over from the African savannah, from hundreds of thousands of years ago when we were apes living in the savannah, in many cases in the modern world, this is not what we should be focusing on, but unfortunately, we are still apes from the savannah. So it's so easy to excite us and to divert our attention from the really crucial issues like climate change to these to press our emotional buttons of fear and hatred.
So the title of your presentation yesterday was There is a Hope.
Reasons for Hope and the bright side of nationalism.
The bright side of nationalism. But if you say that it is something well known that these stories, like the sex in the films, will be always more successful, so what left?
No, it's not always more successful. It's more easy. You don't have to be lazy, either as a TV producer, or as a politician, or as a TV viewer, or as a voter. You don't have to be lazy. You don't have to give in to your basest instincts. You can choose to see the most thoughtful TV series, and you can choose to vote for the more thoughtful politicians. But yes, it's a challenge. I often say that, freedom is it's not something you have. Freedom is something you need to struggle for. Mm-hmm. If a lot of people have this mistake that they think that they have free will, so whatever I choose, it's my free will. I exercise my freedom by watching this TV show or by voting for this politician. But no, in many cases, you're just being manipulated and exploited. Real freedom is when you get to know yourself, you get to know your weaknesses, and you protect yourself against being manipulated and exploited, and then you can exercise truly free choice. But you need to struggle for that. It doesn't come easy.
And do you think that, for instance, in Hungary, obviously we are interested in what do you think about Hungary, the society is ready to choose the harder way?
I'm not an expert on Hungarian society or Hungarian politics, so I wouldn't venture a guess. I hope so, but really I don't know.
Yeah, because when you were talking about nationalism, Hungary is one of the let's say...
The usual suspects.
Yeah. Which says, why Hungary, or why Hungarian politicians choose this way?
Oh, that's a question you need to ask the politicians, not me, why they chose this way.
But theoretically, I mean, in the past, in the history, when leaders tend to choose this way?
Very often it has to do with a history of national trauma. And Hungary suffered several national traumas over the last century, beginning with the First World War and what happened afterwards with the Trianon Treaty, and later on the Second World War, and then the 1956 revolution and the communist dictatorship. So there's a lot of traumas being piled one on top of the other. And it takes time and it takes effort to, just as in personal life, it takes time and effort to recover from personal trauma. So also in the case of nations. And if the effort is not being made and you have all these things inside you, this is what it makes it so easy to press people's emotional buttons and incite these fears and hatreds.
You say these buttons are pushed on purpose by powers, politicians.
Sometimes, part of it is just something that is not even conscious, just becomes part of the political climate or the political culture. Sometimes it's a very deliberate and even cold calculation, say, to divert attention from one problem which is very difficult to deal with, or you don't want politically to deal with this problem, so okay, let's divert the attention to something which is easier to deal with. I mean, the best problems for politicians are non-existent problems. If you can divert the attention of people towards a non-existing problem or a very slight problem, that's wonderful, because it's very easy to deal with the problem. And we see it throughout history. For example, when an authoritarian regime is suffering from a lot of corruption and people are discontented, they have bad services, the healthcare is not functioning, the education system is not functioning, there is ecological problems. So this is very difficult to deal with it. And often you don't want to deal with it because your regime is built on that. So you just divert people's attention to some external danger. So we saw it with the Argentinian junta in 1982. They don't know what to do about the internal problems of Argentina, so let's invade the Falklands, and everybody waves Argentinian flags, and let's kick the British out. And to some extent, you can say that this is what Mr. Putin has been doing with the interventions in Ukraine and the conquest and annexation of Crimea. So many deep structural problems in Russia, such a rich country, which nevertheless provides very often very bad services to its people, and very difficult to deal with it, so let's divert their attention to some external enemy, and everybody joins ranks and forgets about the internal problems.
And speaking about immigration, is an effort to divert attentions?
It can be. Sometimes immigration is a real issue. I don't think we should just dismiss it out of hand. Yep. Certainly to absorb a large number of immigrants into a country, especially if they come from a different culture, a different religion, it's a difficult process, it's a long-term process. I would say that no government should force large-scale immigration on an unwilling population because it won't work. You need it takes decades to really absorb immigration in the right way. You need the cooperation of the country. But at least in Hungary, at least the statistics I saw, is that more people are leaving Hungary than entering the country. I think there is a greater problem here of emigration, especially young, talented people who prefer to see their future elsewhere. That, I think, is a bigger problem for Hungary, at least, than immigration. Most of the immigrants, say from Africa or the Middle East, who want to come to Europe, they don't want to come to Hungary. They want to come to Germany or to Sweden or to one of these places.
I see. How anxious are you about the European Union or the future of Europe?
I'm very anxious because it's now certainly in crisis. And the European Union has so far been the most successful experiment in human history of creating harmony between hundreds of millions of people without uniformity, without enforcing. You know, you have China with 1.5 billion people almost, but there, the social harmony is achieved to a large extent by imposing a single government, a single system, a single language on everybody. The European Union is an amazing achievement. You have more than 500 million people speaking different languages, different nations, different cultures, and nevertheless being able to cooperate effectively and live in peace. And 70 years ago, Europeans were still killing each other by the millions in the world wars. So within a very short time, the European achievement is absolutely remarkable. And I would be very concerned for Europe and the world if the EU collapses. People take things like peace in Europe for granted. When they had the Brexit debate, but still have the Brexit debate in Britain, they talk a lot about the economy, but they take for granted peace.
And what is the biggest threat on Europe right now? You say it was a big achievement. People seem to be happy within the European Union. So why are you still worried?
For two reasons. First of all, you see that there is growing Euroscepticism. Britain leaving, Eurosceptic parties that are in favor of either leaving the European Union or weakening it very much are gaining popularity and sometimes power in places like Italy, like France. And you have another problem, which is that the European Union was built on the assumption that all member states adhere to the same core values of liberal democracy and human rights and so forth. And they didn't really take into account what will happen if you have some members who don't. And we are now seeing a situation in which you could have a European Union in which, I don't know, 2 countries, 4 countries, 10 countries are no longer liberal democracies, and they no longer believe in the values of liberal democracy, rule of law, separation of powers, all these things. And then either the European Union is paralyzed because you need unanimity, you need consensus for many of its more important decisions, and then even a single country can paralyze the whole union, or you will have to create or the union will just collapse, and some countries will leave to create perhaps a tighter union which is more committed to these core values. But a situation in which you have a big European Union which is completely paralyzed, this is not helping anybody.
And also, like, if you speak a lot about AI and technological development, and in that sense, Europe is falling behind the US.
Yes.
If you see the big companies, the successful companies, is it also a threat for Europe?
Yes. We now see the development of a race between the United States and China in the new technologies, especially in information technology and AI. And the race is really between these 2 giants, and Europe is far, far behind. And I think it would be good, not just for Europe, but for the whole world, for Europe to be a third force and a balancing force, because in AI arms race between the USA and China, it doesn't matter who wins the arms race, humanity will be the loser. There will be many steps that are very dangerous. You wouldn't like to develop AI in certain directions, like creating killer robots, or you wouldn't like to give algorithms too much authority over humans, over policy, over finance. But in an arms race situation, you will not be able to slow down and hold back. People will say, yes, it's very dangerous to give AI so much power over our lives, and the smart thing will be to wait 20 years, 50 years, develop the technology, test it, do it carefully. But we can't wait, because the Chinese are doing it right now. So we must do it, even though it's dangerous, we must do it now. And the Chinese will say the same thing about the Americans. And the result will be that we will develop extremely dangerous technologies and use them in ways that can threaten the very survival of humanity. And it's all because of this arms race. So we need to kind of lower down the flames, try to create greater cooperation. Europe can play a big part in that. And I would also advise for Europeans, when they develop technology, not to copy the Chinese or the American model of surveillance capitalism, that AI is surveying the individuals in the service of the big corporations, and not to follow the Chinese example of doing it in the service of the government, but to have a very different third European path which reflects the core European values, to develop technology which doesn't downgrade humans but upgrades them, to develop technology which doesn't survey individuals in the service of a corporation or a government, but just the opposite, survey corporations and governments in the service of the individuals. I think it can be done from a technical aspect. It's just not being done in California and Eastern China, and it can be done in Europe.
By the way, have you mentioned these thoughts to Mark Zuckerberg?
We talked about some of these issues,
and
yes,
what was
certainly.
his response?
Oh, complicated. They are very concerned about China. Like they are getting into this dangerous mindset of this is an arms race, we need to move faster. They are, and not just him, I'm not focusing just on Mark Zuckerberg. I met other people in Silicon Valley, it's not just Facebook. Amazon is doing things that can be as dangerous, even more dangerous than Facebook. Now Facebook gets all the heat, all the attention, but things are happening in the dark with other corporations like Amazon that could be even more problematic. So they've reached a point when they realize that their naive optimism of the 1990s and early 2000s about let's just connect everybody and let information flow and the world will be free and peaceful, they realize this isn't working. But they think, most of them, that it's just the system is good, but it's being abused by some bad actors, let's say like the Russians. Yeah. So we just need a few patches to fix the system. And they are still not coming to terms with the possibility that there could be some very deep structural problems within the systems they built. Mm-hmm. For example, that Facebook is abusing human attention on a massive scale, never seen before in history. Billions of people, their attention is being hijacked and abused by algorithms that have managed to hack the human brain and are now, it's not just political brainwashing, it's just making people waste enormous amounts of time on irrelevant things. It's encouraging mental laziness. It's really downgrading humans.
So shouldn't we talk about these companies as superpowers like Europe? So perhaps the issues you're talking about, let it be artificial intelligence or whatever, it shouldn't be, or it won't be the business of China or Europe, but the Google, Facebook, and Amazon. Are these corporations already rose to the level of big, not nations?
Yes,
only,
I mean, nations? The big corporations, not just the American ones, but also the Chinese ones, the Baidu and Tencent, Alibaba, they are now major actors on the world stage. And just as you have, say, competition between China and the USA for influence, so you have like Uber and Didi. Didi is like the Chinese version of Uber, fighting over territories over the world. Who will control the Hungarian market? Who will control the Brazilian market? Uber or Didi? And part of the problem is that this could easily lead to kind of a new kind of colonialism when all the data and most of the profits from all over the world are going to California or to Eastern China. And they become better and better because the development of technology largely depends on the accumulation of data. So the more data flowing from all over the world to California or to China, the easier it is for them to develop even faster, and the harder it is for anybody else to compete with them. So, you know, you had the model of colonialism in the 19th century, where raw materials are extracted from the colony. Let's say the British take cotton from Egypt, move it to Manchester. There, the high-tech industry of textiles is located. There they produce the clothes, the textiles, and then they send the finished goods to Egypt to sell. And most of the profits are in Manchester, of course. It's the same model we are now seeing with data, that the data is being collected in, say, Egypt or Hungary. It's sent to San Francisco or Shanghai. There they developed the really powerful and lucrative products, and they sell it back to Hungary or to Egypt. And that's really a model of colonialism.
So we not only need to convince governments to use, you know, their power wisely, but also companies which by their nature goes after the profit.
Yeah.
Still there's a chance for hope.
Well, you know, with companies you still have political power to do something about it. Again, an individual country, certainly a small country like Hungary, will find it very, very difficult to deal with a giant like Amazon or like Tencent. This is, again, one of the important things about the European Union, that it gives small countries like Hungary, when they are part of a big bloc, if the European Union is getting into a clash with Facebook or with Amazon, it has a good chance of winning. But if it's 28 small countries, each by itself, so Germany would probably be okay. But a country like Hungary, like Lithuania, like Slovenia will find it very, very difficult to win in a clash with one of these titans.
I would love to keep asking you, but I promise to get some questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, we have two hostesses with microphones, so just raise your hand if you want to ask a question.